listening to Give God 90, where we're not afraid of the tough biblical questions, because we will dig through the language, the culture, and the history to find the truth revealed in the words of our Creator.
Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for letting us spend some time with you tonight, or at least it's Thursday night where we are. Something a little different tonight, as you'll see once we get into it. I want to remind everyone, if you haven't checked out GiveGod90.com lately, go ahead and do that. Don't forget the like buttons, the share buttons, and all those good things. And whenever you're listening, you can leave a comment if you have the free app, the free Spreaker app, and the free account. And that way you can leave us a comment if you want to. Or you can do like a lot of people do and just send me a private message or an email or something later. That's all right, too. Want to jump right in tonight because I am being supervised, and this is going to take some time.
Yes, you are being supervised. Hello, everyone.
I promised the other day that I would get through the extremely technical report published by Helion. And from their website, on their About page, Helion is an all-science open access journal that is part of the Cell Press family. That's where the 5 scientists published their report. They reviewed over 1,650 papers and selected the ones that were determined to be the most well-documented for their research. And I'm going to read a portion, and this portion is marked Method. I thought it was kind of interesting. Well, the whole thing I thought was interesting, but I'm like that. So it reads, our scoping review is based on a systematic literature search in Medline, Cochrane Library, and World Health Organization COVID-19 database up until November 30th, 2021, on toxic effects of low-level carbon dioxide, plus or minus 3%, including mask effects on carbon dioxide breathing. Only English and German language peer-reviewed records were considered that explicitly describe the toxicity of carbon dioxide at low concentrations, as well as studies quantifying carbon dioxide when wearing masks under everyday conditions. That's kind of a mouthful right there. That was one sentence. That's wow. The kind of research paper this is. It continues medical surgical masks on one hand and N95 masks on the other were of interest here. Search items according to the criteria defined in the PICO scheme, including carbon dioxide, breathing, and toxicity, as well as carbon dioxide and mask, including surgical and N95. We searched PubMed and Google Scholar for additional articles of interest. 2 independent researchers identified and screened the eligible studies. The selected papers were checked by all authors for final eligibility. To expand the amount of published data further, we reviewed citations from included articles to identify additional research. Inclusion criteria were studies dealing with CO2 breath concentrations below or equal to 3% and its effects. We based this threshold on the legal requirements for short-term exposure limits, which is 15 minutes. Now, where the 15 minutes comes from is actually from the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health. There is a link to this in the report, and I did look at it. It's kind of interesting. What struck me in that methodology is they only reviewed English and German papers. Those were the only ones that they studied. Now, I know that other nations have published studies similar with very, very similar results. It's, this isn't what I'm saying. This is what the people who, did the studies are saying. and they only accepted the papers where they used the methods approved by their own discretion. And when I say their own discretion, I'm talking about the scientist's discretion. There's different machines and different ways of doing it, but they wanted to be as closely matched as possible. After I looked at the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health website, I thought, well, let me look at the material safety data sheet for the N95 mask, which has been changed. In the last 3 years, when I looked at it a few years ago, the material safety data sheet recommended wearing that mask in no more than 15-minute intervals, which means you wear it for 15 minutes, do whatever it is you needed to do, and then you had to take it off for a few minutes before you went back to doing what you were doing. There's a reason for this. We're going to get into that in a second. But what really actually surprised me was on the material safety data sheet, they have the reproductive toxicity statement, reproductive and or developmental effects. And it reads, for the component or components, either no data are currently available or the data are not sufficient for classification. But that's only on the components. It has nothing to do with the way it's used. Isn't that interesting? Here's where things get a little sketchy or strange. From the discussion portion of the report, now I want you to listen very, very carefully to this. The above data, including the tables that they indicate that mandatory daily long-term use of masks, surgical or N95, especially for children, adolescents, younger people, and pregnant women, can lead to negative effects. With reliable measurements, the experimentally determined CO2 concentrations in the inhaled air under masks can reach, depending on exposure time, values of 0.42 up to 3.52 volume percent. That is outside the limits of what you're supposed to get. One has to remember that in those experiments, the time measured wearing the mask ranged from 1 minute to several minutes, with a maximum of 60 minutes in a few studies, which is not always representative for real-world settings. Nevertheless, the results of our review show that mask use can lead to levels exceeding the NIOSH and EU indicative exposure limit values in directives, both acutely and chronically. Let me read that part again. The results of our review show that mask use can lead to levels exceeding the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health and the EU, European Union, indicative exposure limit values in directives, both acutely and chronically. Now, this may have the opportunity to open some avenues for compensation for mothers who were forced into wearing a mask for an extended period of time while pregnant, and who have children who suffer from negative results or were stillborn. That wasn't in the report, that's from me. At least in the United States, where you can sue anybody over anything. Basically, this report says what I said a few years ago when the pandemic began. Mankind is designed to breathe oxygen, not CO2. In fact, I recently saw a video of the founder of Greenpeace who was speaking out against the false narrative of global warming and climate change because we're trying to reduce the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere. Well, CO2, carbon dioxide, is what the trees use to photosynthesize, the CO2 and produce oxygen so that we can breathe. If we take away their CO2, we have less foliage. CO2 is not a greenhouse gas. What actually is, if you really want to think about it, because the plants use CO2 and expel oxygen, that would make oxygen the greenhouse gas. You see how folks like to change things around. Do you realize, and I didn't realize this when I was young, because I grew up in the 70s, but since the 1970s, mankind around the world has become the guinea pigs for major corporations who have aligned themselves with the enemy to destroy mankind. And they've tricked a lot of people into believing that they're doing this so that your life can improve. They're making you sick to improve your life. No, they're making you sick to line their pockets with money. But sadly, this is the world we live in. And we're living in this world because people are not living the way we're designed to live. We no longer believe the Bible, let alone actually use it as the owner's manual for our lives. Do you realize what that does? If you don't actually know what the Bible says, you can't own you. It's like when you buy a car, you get that big, thick stack of books now. The ones that used to tell you how to set the points and adjust everything. Now it says, oh, by the way, don't drink the radiator fluid. Yeah, those books. If you have a book that thick for your car and you don't read it, you have the Bible for your life and you don't read it, and you wonder why your car doesn't run properly, and you wonder why you don't feel good. There's no difference. That's one of the best analogies I can come up with. Excuse me. Look in your own kitchen. I imagine most people have some kind of poison under their sink, whether you know it or not. And I bet most of the folks, at least in the United States, have some type of pre-prepared meal of some kind. Now, these pre-prepared meals are filled with preservatives and chemicals that do more harm than good. So let me ask you, why are they there? Why are they in your house? Did you believe some advertisement that said it's good for you? We'll get to that in a second, too. What do you clean your house with? Bleach? Well, you're not alone. A lot of people have been tricked into using bleach or some other harsh chemical. Did you know that what bleach is made with? It's made with chlorine. It was weaponized in World War I. It's what they used to kill people. In fact, the man who developed chlorine was Carl Wilhelm Scheele. He died when he was 44 years old in 1786. Apparently, the stuff even killed the guy who first put it together. Think about that. Does it have its place? Yeah, it does. When used properly, but not in the house where you're going to be rebreathing all that air all the time. Our Creator has given us everything we need to live the way He intended us to live, even in this broken, cursed world. If you go back and you look. Oh, hi, Anna. Very good. Very, very good. I'm glad to see that you chimed in with that, because there's a lot of that being used in this house too. Hydrogen peroxide's a much better cleaner than bleach ever thought about being. You ever wonder, the old doctor's offices, you'd go in and you didn't smell that nasty, what I call hospital smell, because they cleaned everything with formaldehyde and bleach, because the old doctors had their offices cleaned with peroxide. Left everything kind of smelling cleaner than a hospital, which isn't hard to do, because when you think about it, a hospital should be like one of the cleanest places you ever go into, but where's everybody go when they get sick? It's probably one of the filthiest places you can think of. Leviticus 19 begins with the instructions for Moses to tell the people, "Speak to the whole congregation of Israel and tell them, 'Be holy, because I, Yehovah, your God, am holy.'" And a few verses later, in verse 19, we read, "You are to keep my statutes. You shall not crossbreed two different kinds of livestock. You shall not sow your fields with two different kinds of seed, and you shall not wear clothing made of two different kinds of material." The kinds referred to is not the naturally occurring hybrids like a mule or that kind of thing. They're both equine kind. They're both horse kind. What's being said is that we shouldn't attempt to breed between kinds like a horse and a cow, equine and bovine, man or beast. You see where I'm going with that one, right? It can't happen. We are not designed, and really nothing that I can think of is designed to crossbreed between kinds. I know that's a little sort of semi-technical, but if that makes sense, you can't breed, for instance, a cat and a dog. One's canine, one's feline. It just doesn't work. Now, when we grow up a garden, we always used open pollinated seed. Now, the thing is, don't sow different seeds together. Cross-pollination has the opportunity to corrupt the plant kind. And it doesn't mean we don't plant different varieties of tomatoes or different varieties of peppers or different varieties of beans. It means you keep them separated. When Gregor Mandel began experimenting with hybrids in the mid-1800s, what he was actually doing was looking to find out how dominant traits were passed on. But his work began an entire industry that today produces agricultural products not based on how nutritious they are. It's not even based on how they taste, but it's based on how good they look to the buyer, and more importantly, how well they hold their appearance during shipping and shelf life. That's what we're breeding for today. How many times have you heard somebody say, tomatoes just don't taste like they used to? They don't taste like tomatoes. Myra said, this doesn't cook like I remember it cooking. It's because the buyers in the stores, the people who actually go to the store and shop, they want something that looks like they think it should look. After all, eye appeal is buy appeal, right? But if it tastes bad or it doesn't perform well in the recipe, is it worth your money? And that brings me to this. Why put fuel in your body that is less than adequate for your body to function the way it should? You wouldn't put water in your gas tank and then expect your car to actually start and run. You can't use gas in a diesel engine. Bad things happen. If you put the wrong thing in your belly, you won't be healthy. It all starts with what you eat. Now, Mars brought the same brand of mayonnaise for years, but not anymore. Because of what's on the label. They're not hiding it anymore. Did you ever think you would read a label on something that you were going to eat that said ingredients derived from a bioengineered source? Green Business Network actually published in 2014. I'm going to let you read this because it's just weird.
Hellmann's used to take pride in its real ingredients. Now, Hellmann's mayonnaise is made with less than wholesome ingredients produced in ways that put people, animals, pollinators, and the planet at risk. Half of the ingredients are likely produced from genetically modified GMO crops. The eggs are also sourced from concentrated animal feeding operations, CAFOs, commonly referred to as factory farms. The actual list of ingredients in Hellmann's real mayonnaise are soybean oil, water, whole eggs, and egg yolks, vinegar, salt, sugar, lemon juice, calcium disodium, EDTA used to protect quality, and natural flavors.
Okay. I was nice to her because
next part I cannot pronounce.
I can't either. You know, the soybean oil, the eggs, the vinegar, the sugar, and lemon juice are most likely from the GMO sources. EDTA. I know there's going to be somebody out there who knows how to pronounce this, and I don't. But I'm going to attempt it. EDTA. Ethylene diamine tetraacetic acid. It's used to bind iron and calcium molecules. Okay? Being studious, I looked at the material safety data sheet for it. The first thing that I saw, and if you look for it, you'll notice it too. And by the way, you can, if you Google material safety data sheet, EDTA, you can see this. The classification. The chemical is considered hazardous by the 2012 OSHA Hazard Communication Standard. It goes on to say, it is harmful if inhaled. If it gets into your eyes, you are to flush with water for several minutes. If it gets on your skin, wash with water for 15 minutes. Does that sound like something you want to eat? I don't want to eat it. Not me. We recently learned that a chemical appeal, APEEL, is being used to treat avocados. Their material safety data sheet reads, causes serious eye damage, may cause allergic skin reaction, harmful to aquatic wildlife with long-lasting effects. Do you still want to eat it? It goes on to say, do not induce vomiting, give plenty of water to drink, and get medical attention.
A little sticker is on your fruits.
The little sticker's on your fruits. It's being used on your food. Okay, I grew up on a farm. I know that it doesn't matter how much you're going to wash it and scrub it, you're not going to get it all off. This stuff is either sprayed on with water or fogged on. Either way, it gets on the skin and it's absorbed. You can't wash it off. Living the way we're designed to live by our Creator means more than, follow the golden rule, love God, love your neighbor, do unto others. It means we have to be vigilant. It means we have to be vigilant with what we do. It means we have to be vigilant with what we eat. It means we have to be vigilant with what we hear and what we read and even what we see. We should no longer be deceived basically by the enemy, because the enemy wants to destroy mankind any way it can. Living the way we're designed to live means standing with the Creator and not against Him. Now, if you're actually serious about choosing to be a faithful believer, then trust the Bible. When you hear something, when you read something, when you see something that doesn't agree with the Bible, consider the Bible correct. And consider the one who conflicts with the Bible wrong. That's pretty much what you need to understand. Okay? We need to do what is written. And here's the fun part. I should probably address the don't wear mixed material, okay? Because I've heard some really strange I shouldn't say strange, but I've heard some strange sermons about this. It's amazing some of the reasons they came up with for this. Well, back then all they had really was linen and wool, and those two things, they shrink at different ways. It's always going to look bad. Well, maybe. Recently, I've actually heard if you mix linen and wool, there's an electrical interference between the two, and it causes the body to react. Okay. Maybe. Well, while that might have some validity, we need to remember that they also had cotton and they had animal skins. Electrical interference, I'm not sure it's electrical interference, but okay. They tested it, possibly. But remember that at the time that this was written, all thread was spun by hand. Okay? It's difficult to obtain exactly the same thread size even among the same material. We know people who still spin wool by hand. And after several years of doing it, several years of experience, they still struggle getting yarn the same size all the way through. Then, when you think about that, it had to be spun, it had to be put on a loom, it had to be put together with the correct weave. That's a whole other issue, right? The one thing I've not come across, and I have looked for this, and it's getting a lot of attention these days, and that is frequency. And frequency is different than electrical interference. If you've ever slept on linen bed sheets, linen does not conduct electricity like cotton does. So when you crawl in and it's dry weather, in linen you don't get the fireworks display under the sheets like you do with cotton. It's kind of cool, but you don't get it with linen. But everything actually vibrates or resonates at its own frequency, even mankind. Have you ever, there's a lot of this thought going on now. Certain studies are being done with music and how sound can heal. It's because the frequencies they're using, they're attempting to mimic the frequency of the human body. That's not, this hoodoo voodoo stuff. These are real, actual scientists who were saying, we got to look into this. And it's done, with all of the proper equipment. It's not somebody standing in the corner beating on a drum or doing whatever it is that some of those folks do. But here's the interesting part. Most people, they actually feel healthier if they wear non-blended clothing. Now, that sounds like I'm pulling your leg. I know. I didn't believe it either. But I wear a lot of linen, unless I'm working out where it's going to get messed up. Then, it's usually cotton, because denim's cotton, right? When I can find it at the thrift store, silk is another option, especially for shirts. But it's expensive if you buy it new, so I don't. But very rarely do I look for polyester clothing, and that's for a really good reason. And I say that sitting here wearing polyester shorts at the moment because they're my boat shorts, and I typically only wear them when I think I'm going to get wet. So, it dries faster. It doesn't hold water like cotton and other things do. If I need to be out welding something, I'm certainly not going to wear polyester. That would just be silly. It melts. So here's an experiment for you. I know, I would imagine if you looked in your closet, you're going to find something that says 100% cotton, 100% linen, 100% something. Try wearing it for a couple of weeks. Just go through and pick out some outfits and wear just, all 100% cotton. And it doesn't matter if you wear like blue jeans and a linen shirt or, cotton t-shirt, cotton jeans. But as long as they're not mixed threads, then wear your mixed threads. See if you can tell the difference. That's an interesting experiment that you can do. It doesn't cost you any money because you already own clothes, I hope. But if you try that, message me and let me know if there's a difference. Now, I realize it's going to take a few weeks. That's okay. But let me know if you feel the difference wearing just unblended clothes versus blended clothes. See if you can tell the difference. This will be a very non-scientific experiment, and the results will never be published in any scientific paper. But it would be interesting to see how believers respond to this. It at least for me. Because I happen to know that when I read the Bible, I try to do what it says. Now, do I have some blended shirts? Yeah. But they're dress shirts. They don't get worn very often at all. And they're actually starting to get weeded out. So, because I didn't realize that until a short time ago. When I say short time ago, it's been about a year. But the thing is, if you pay attention to Scripture and you abide by it, treat the Bible like it is the owner's manual for your body and your life, chances are the manufacturer knew what he was saying when he had Moses write this stuff down. Right? So, attempt that. See what it does for you. Now go and live the way you're designed to live. Be vigilant. Pay attention. Read the labels. That's what they're there for. And until Monday, we wish you many, many blessings, everyone.